So it's a pleasure to share some ideas with you here today in a wonderful city like San Francisco, near one of the leading innovation clusters in the world, Silicon Valley. As Dan mentioned, I work with Kleiner, Perkins, Caufield, and Byers in our green tech practice. First and foremost, we are a technology investor across our three practice groups: life sciences, information technology, and green tech. We're looking for entrepreneurs and companies fundamentally trying to create the future today. In our green tech practice, that future is sustainability. For me, it's all about the question of how we put 10 billion people on this planet, share the planet, and do it in a way that things are better today and not worse than tomorrow. In short, if we're apologizing to our grandchildren, we probably got sustainability wrong. Let's see if I can get this guy to work. There we go. As a clean tech investor, you cannot ignore the importance of the transportation sector. This is a massive market, desperate for technology solutions to this economic and environmental crisis. From an economic perspective, our current transportation system is one of our greatest challenges. As a nation, we're almost completely dependent on oil for mobility. All of you know this. Like all extractive resources, oil has been aggressively depleted, and we now import over 8 million barrels of oil per day. Our light vehicle sector alone consumes 4 billion barrel equivalents per day. When we think about that in terms of annual consumption, the scale of the problem is stunning. If we ever thought oil was going to reach $100 a barrel, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room thought that, but if we ever thought it at the policy level, we would have taken action, we would have invested, we would have changed behavior. Instead, we're being slowly boiled like the frog in the pot, making minor adjustments and compromises to our quality of life to make room for yet another increase in fuel prices. In the past, we've responded to each individual fuel crisis with a short-term reaction, but now we seem to have accepted and become almost complacent to the fact that we're going to have to sacrifice a greater and greater share of our resources to afford basic mobility. In normal industries, increased production leads to lower prices. In lithium-ion batteries, we're seeing huge increases in production volumes and rapidly declining prices. Same with wind turbines, solar panels, mobile phones. In oil, we have rising prices, flat production, and increased imports. The oil monopoly is devastating to the US and any other country that is short oil. In 2008, Oak Ridge National Laboratories estimated that our oil transportation problem cost the country $500 billion in wealth transfer and loss of GDP per year. And that was just 2008, so for the SaaS types in the room, that's recurring revenue. $500 billion ring the register every year. This is just a brief slide. In the current debate on the economy and the budget, I think the word trillion gets thrown around too much. Couple statistics on how much a trillion actually is, and a trillion is 2 years of this problem. I think my favorite one is the 1.5 mile wide freeway from LA to Boston. It kind of is the problem, and it's the cost of the problem. So we never intended to become a nation hooked on imported energy, yet today an uprising on the other side of the world puts the family rent check, the small business P&L, and the manufacturing sector at risk. It's interesting, as I was working on these comments, the furnace in my home went out, which was great. And the guy who called me to repair it actually was complaining on the phone and telling me how far my house was for San Jose. And verbatim, he said, I don't even know if I can afford to come out there with fuel prices. So this is very real. It's not anecdotal. The small businesses absolutely get hammered when fuel spikes. And the spikes keep happening, and they happen with shorter periods of time in between. Expensive oil, though, isn't a temporary problem as a result of the latest crisis in the Middle East. Freedom of movement is a defining quality of modern life. I think that's why you're all here. You're trying to come up with ways to deliver smart mobility, but we all acknowledge that mobility is critical to modern life. We know from experience that modernizing populations prioritize 3 things before any other: cars, color TVs, climate control. That's the first thing they want. We've seen that from the 1950s all the way going forward. So the developing world is just getting started. The Chinese vehicle market is now basically equal to the American market, but there are 2 Americas in China yet to move into the middle class. So the story repeats itself in the rest of the world: India, South America, Africa, the rest of Asia. All of these people rightfully want their 3 C's. Will the world run out of oil? No. Has the world run out of cheap oil? Absolutely. How do we know? This is economics. The cheapest is delivered first. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So for the past century, the oil industry has evaluated potential oil fields and logically prioritized by the risk-adjusted returns. Why bother with offshore oil when you have East Texas? Why bother with deep water when you have Gulf Coast? Why bother with tar sands when you have Saudi Arabian crude? There will be ups and downs, and the peak oilers will argue with the drill baby drill crowd, but the CFOs and the transportation experts will be stuck with a very basic problem. The next oil production project will be more expensive than the last. It's just economics. The bottom line is that even if our transportation model met all of our needs, which it doesn't, we couldn't afford to keep it up much longer. So this isn't working. That's why you're all here on a Saturday. The system that was thrown together in the post-World War II era will have a very short life in modern history. An oil-dependent, suburban, single-passenger vehicle model fails to deliver the economic, social, and safety value we should demand from the next generation of transportation technology, both the hardware and the software. Interestingly, incumbent transportation technology actually reinforces the urban-suburban problem. Our loud, polluted, crowded streets detract from the most sustainable strategy we have, the development of dense, diverse, vibrant cities. The most powerful and capital-efficient clean tech strategy is basic efficiency. We at Kleiner Perkins invest in solar, we invest in batteries, we invest in wind, we invest in smart grid, but the fastest payback is basic efficiency. And urban centers are incredibly efficient at delivering jobs, goods, services, and quality of life. Specific to transportation, an urban population has a lower vehicle miles traveled. GDP per barrel of oil is much higher in vibrant cities than decentralized towns. The greater the population density, the more potential for economic specialization and value. Where else but a great city can you find a kosher deli, a yoga studio, an acupuncture clinic, and an intellectual property lawyer all in the same block? Would this conference have occurred anywhere else? But in the US, we have a love-hate relationship with our great cities. Most of our intellectual property, our art, our literature, our citizens live and grew up in great cities, but many individuals fled to the suburbs during the social upheaval of the last century. I think that was a temporary problem, but it is going to take time and capital and entrepreneurship to fix. The suburban model is inefficient, but the twin transportation crises of energy and environment will bring us home to our cities. We're already seeing this play out in our real estate pricing. During our housing crisis, the outlying suburbs experienced profound deflation when the credit bubble burst, but the urban core of the innovation cities held their value, and those properties near public transit often fared the best. As investors, we're excited to support great new business models, reinforcing urbanization and localization. It's good for the economy, the environment, and our sense of community with each other. So while I believe that the future of development is a more urban model where we more efficiently consume energy and generate value, we can not ignore the need for vehicles, both public and private, to play a major role in our lives. It's a valid aspiration, but it isn't practical in the near term for everyone to bike or walk for every trip. Vehicles provide incredible value in their ability to move us quickly in all weather. The good news on that front is that we're experiencing the beginning of a wholesale shift in how we use energy to move local vehicles. I define local vehicles as the short-haul cars, the trucks, the buses that provide mobility in our cities and suburbs. Local vehicles are the ones we should be concerned about. They consume more than half of our imported oil, and if we can solve that problem, we have enough oil and biofuels to fuel our long-haul trains, ships, and planes. So 2011 is what I believe is the beginning of the electrification of local transport, and all local vehicle applications are vulnerable to this technology disruption. As an urban transportation conference, you're probably wondering why do electric cars matter? That's going to be a solution for the suburban problem. But I actually think the technology is going to go after urban areas faster, and it's going to deliver improvements there first. So personal cars, trucks, and buses, I believe, are going to shift away from internal combustion engines as their prime mover technology, and our cities and our global environment will be the better for it. And the main reason is what I just mentioned when discussing cities. Efficiency is the most powerful clean tech, and no technology delivers more efficiency for movement than an electric motor. The electric vehicle debate often focuses on the cost of the battery packs, the range of the first generation modern EVs, but I think it's a better idea to take a hard look at the incumbent technology to understand how vulnerable it is to disruption and how close this transition is at hand. It's a Saturday, this is an unconference, so I hope you bear with me and enjoy a laugh while we go through a basic discussion of how these technologies really work. So in really simple terms, this is how an internal combustion engine turns energy into motion. First, a mixture of gasoline and air is sprayed into a cylinder. This is compressed by a piston, and at an optimal point in the compression stroke, a spark plug creates an electrical spark that ignites the fuel. The combustion of the fuel results in the generation of heat, and the hot gases that are in the cylinder are then at a higher pressure than the fuel-air mixture, and so drive the piston back down. These combustion gases are vented, and the fuel-air mixture reintroduced to run a second stroke. The outward linear motion of the piston is harnessed by a crankshaft to produce circular motion. Valves control the intake of fuel-air mixture and allow exhaust gases to exit at the appropriate times. Everybody got that? Very simple. The problem is that process only takes 20% of the energy that we used and turns it into motion. The other 80% escapes as either engine or exhaust heat. Why is this so complicated? It's because burning fuel is best at generating heat, not movement. The entire machine is trying desperately to convert an explosion into forward movement without losing all of the energy to heat. That $500 billion problem I spoke of, only $100 billion of the energy went to move anything. The other $400 billion went to heat the air in your cities. This is a painful slide since my furnace doesn't work right now. Why did we build an entire vehicle industry based on burning fuel? Why is our infrastructure based on burning things? It's because we've been burning things for a long time. We've been burning wood to heat food since Prometheus. Before the automobile was invented, we were burning coal to move steam locomotives and ships. But most importantly, when the auto was invented, liquid fuel was the only practical way to store energy on board a vehicle. We had electric motors at the dawn of the automobile, but we didn't have sufficient battery technology. Gasoline was a wasted byproduct of the kerosene industry, and it provided cheap, energy-dense fuel. If we had had sufficient battery technology, how would an electric motor work in contrast to the engine I just described? All right, you ready for this? This is going to take a while. An electric charge passes through a looped circuit producing a magnetic field. The magnetic field causes a rotor to spin, producing circular motion. That's it. Which one of those technologies would you want to explain on a test? This process is 90% efficient. And there are actually electric motor technologies that we're seeing today in our green tech practice that are above the 90% level. It's very simple. Zero local emissions, 4 times minimum, greater energy efficiency, fewer moving parts, less maintenance, quiet. The sheer difference in mechanical complexity shows that we've reached the end of meaningful improvement in engine technology. We're at the point of diminishing returns. Even if we add turbochargers, downsize cylinder count, capture a few points of waste heat, and deploy stop-start microhybrid technology, the engine can only compete by adding cost and complexity, while the simple small electric motor dominates. And the innovation industry is just getting started on improving electric motors for vehicles. Use the right tool for the job, combustion is best for heat. Of course, the electric vehicle industry and our ability to move away from oil and transportation will be paced by the cost of battery technology. We know that, but I think we're actually farther along than most people realize. If you look at the lithium-ion cells coming from the major suppliers today, we're already below $200 per kilowatt hour. I understand if you're not an EV buff, that probably doesn't mean anything to you. But many experts believe that we actually need to hit $250 per kilowatt hour for electric vehicles to make sense, a slightly higher number for plug-in hybrids. The $200 I quote isn't an automotive-grade battery pack, but we're getting pretty close, and the industry is scaling very fast. It's being driven by 3 huge consumer trends: computers, mobile phones, which most of you probably have 1.3 with you, and now electric vehicles. So why am I talking about electric vehicles at a transportation conference focused on urbanization? It's because I actually think this is where it's going to happen first and where it's going to deliver the most value. As I mentioned in the start, the urban transportation world is likely the first mover here. The mighty but compact electric motor, by virtue of its torque, can move a heavy vehicle as easily as it can accelerate an electric car. The engine cannot scale in the same way. The battery costs for electric vehicles already solve for your urban applications today, and the energy savings per mile are much greater in the heavy vehicles. especially those operating in a stop-start urban environment. Did you know that your heavy delivery trucks that are moving goods around your city only achieve 6 to 8 miles per gallon? Our transit buses, even the hybrids, barely get above 4 miles per gallon, and these units are running 40 to 50,000 miles per year. There are individual vehicles out there in the fleet that are consuming more than $25,000 of liquid fuel today. You can afford a lot of battery packs for $25,000 of fuel. This means that battery pack costs are going to pay back very quickly in this market. We can also end the debate about charging infrastructure being chicken and egg, because the infrastructure market buys chickens and eggs. Centralized fleet electric vehicles offer an exciting possibility for grid storage, backup, services, and emergency response. Finally, electric vehicle technology in heavy vehicles will change our urban areas in a really noticeable way, in a very positive one. We'll have significantly less noise and local pollution. One diesel truck produces the equivalent of 32 cars. A diesel bus pulling away from a bus stop is at 90 decibels, which can cause hearing loss. I read some of the posts on the Transportation Camp blog, and members wondered what we could do as innovators, investors, and policymakers to make urban transport more compelling and fun. One idea I think that's going to help a lot is when we make our transit vehicles some of the deployment of our highest technology in our economy, not our lowest, and when they're quiet, comfortable, and you can have a mobile phone conversation without screaming into an earpiece. One of the reasons the future of this technology in urban vehicles excites me is it can benefit so many people so quickly. Urban vehicles are high impact. Their operation affects thousands of people through their emissions, their fuel, and their noise. For all these reasons, I think we're going to see the non-car cities become the leaders in electric vehicle technology. We'll have light rail without the rail. We'll have whisper-quiet bus rapid transit, and we'll have delivery of bagels and newspapers at 4 a.m. without waking up to that truck. Urban electric vehicles also means that the infrastructure efficiency that we get from things like light rail are going to happen without the capital cost and without the inflexibility of traditional infrastructure investment. We're going to have the same type of zero-emission benefits and the same cost savings per mile, but we're not going to be constrained by the rail, the overhead wires, or the third rail. As software developers, one of the things that we can be excited about is the fact that we're going to have a pool of zero-emission vehicle assets, and they're not going to be constrained by upfront planning around rail. So we'll be able to route them real time. We'll be freed from the tracks, the third rails, the wires. Of course, I'm excited about new technologies across the transportation space, and I think we're going to bring a lot of efficiency and quality of life through a shift of hardware in both software, through a shift in both software and hardware. I think those transportation leaders, we should be thinking about how we're going to plan for the transition to non-fossil fuel transportation today. The end of the cheap energy era is going to reinforce the urban renaissance. Home buyers now ask about the walkability index of a property. The suburban commute is more expensive with $4 gasoline, and that's cheap relative to the rest of the world. And local trade will be advantaged by the minimal energy cost required. There are new technologies and business models that will change the way we think about transportation, energy, vehicle ownership, and local trade. I hope you share those ideas with me, new ideas about transportation and urbanization. Those two industry sectors are going to deliver some of the most dramatic sustainability improvements we see in the 21st century. I'm excited to be working on all those areas on a clean tech investment team, and I hope we get the opportunity to work together in the future. Thank you again for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to share some ideas with you.